breaking news just in is that Anneliese Dodds, now she's the Minister for International Development, she has resigned her post over Keir Starmer's decision to cut international aid. She, of course, was a minister attending cabinet, former shadow chancellor, former chair of the Labour Party, an incredibly senior figure in the Labour Party, a close ally of Sir Keir Starmer, resigning in the last few minutes over those international development cuts. Ian Duncan-Smith, your reaction?
Yeah, I can't tell you. Yeah, I can't tell you how angry many members of the Labour Party are about the reduction in overseas aid. There really has been a severe reaction. She was actually the minister that I was referring to, who was at the dispatch box trying to defend the Chagos deal, and she got absolutely blasted. I don't suppose she wants to go through that again. So that may also be part of her reason to go, because she thinks the whole thing has got whiskers all over it and there are no answers to it. But when it comes to overseas aid, it is essentially part of what she does. And so I guess, like many others who, by the way, who sat looking really shocked when he said to them they're lowering it from 5 to 3%, I have to say for most of the British public, they were saying, yeah, quite right. But I think for Labour, who have cleaved to this, I think this is a very big deal, and for her, obviously, it is now. So I think there's another ruction breaking out in the cabinet over this and other things.
Yeah, very difficult for David Lammy now, surely. He wrote in The Guardian a couple of days ago justifying this decision. Now, he's always campaigned for more foreign aid, as far as I can tell, and he's always managed to criticise the Conservatives for any attempt to cut back on foreign aid. Surely if he were principled, if this is a principled resignation from Anneliese Dodds, surely he would want to do the same.
You are referring to David Lammy, I think, aren't you?
Yes, David Lammy.
Principle and David Lammy don't always necessarily go together. This is a man that said that Donald Trump was a fascist and a terrible man and attacked him generally. Now, apparently, he thinks Donald Trump is a wonderful person. This is a man who managed to...
OK, well...
to do U-turns, even when there isn't the whole idea of a principle, something he's that bothered about.
Well, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, thanks so much for sportingly responding to that breaking news that we had during this interview, and indeed for comments on Chagos, which I'm sure is going to be an issue that runs and runs. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, thanks indeed for joining us.
Using the internet without a VPN, a virtual private network, is a bit like taking to the road without car insurance. All it takes is one unlucky moment to cost you a lot of cash. This video's sponsor is Private Internet Access. They are the VPN to help keep you safe. Click the link in the description below to find out why over 30 million people have downloaded PIA to protect themselves online. A virtual private network is an app that hides your IP address and helps keep your data private. When you're browsing the internet at home, you give up a large amount of data to businesses, to shops, and indeed to social media giants too. Hackers have the ability to steal your personal data with ease, including sensitive information such as passwords, keystrokes, and even your personal photos. Private Internet Access helps protect your personal data by encrypting your internet connection to keep your data out of the hands of cyber criminals. And it's not just hackers either to be concerned about. Information can be censored too. When Canada passed their C18 bill, social media giants decided to ban news content on their platforms. But PIA can protect your ability to consume the news and content you love. Private Internet Access is available for Windows users, Mac OS, Android, Linux, iOS, and you can use one PIA subscription to protect an unlimited amount of devices. And we've got a huge GBNews discount for you too. Click the link in this video's description and you'll get a massive 83% off PIA. That's under £2 a month, the price of a coffee, and you'll get an extra 4 months completely free on top. Also, there's a 30-day money-back guarantee too. Visit piavpn.com/GBnews to start protecting yourself digitally today.
Very interesting. We were wondering whether there'd be any resignations on this issue, because foreign aid is very important to a lot of Labour politicians, as well as Conservative politicians and others, I'm sure. And it is a matter potentially of principle. Very interesting.
Well, let's get some more on this now. Delighted to be joined by the chief political correspondent at The Times, Aubrey Allegretti. Because Aubrey, in her resignation letter to the Prime Minister, Anneliese Dodds makes it clear that she had decided to resign some days ago, but wanted to hold off from making this public until the Prime Minister returned from his Washington trip.
Absolutely. It seems that this announcement sort of started brewing on Monday, but that most cabinet ministers didn't find out until their weekly meeting with the Prime Minister on Tuesday. And there was only a very short space of time between that cabinet meeting and Keir Starmer's statement to the Commons, where he laid out this cut to international development spending, saying that it was going to be part of offsetting the increases to defence spending that he wanted to take with him to the White House. Now, Anneliese Dodds is the International Development Minister. She has at various points been quite high profile in the Labour Party. She was briefly Sir Keir Starmer's first shadow chancellor, and she was gradually sort of reshuffled down the pecking order during his tenure as leader. But now, in her new role as International Development Minister, she has decided to take a principled stand, saying she didn't want to interrupt or sort of overshadow Keir Starmer's trip to the US. But clearly, she's been wrestling with this for several days and decided now is the right time to sort of stand up and take a stand in a resignation letter, which is very critical of the impact and the effects of this decision on Britain's global standing and for countries that rely on this aid around the world.
Yes, indeed. It's a reasonably long letter, detailed, as you say, and she's made it public today. Do we have any reason? Is there no reason to believe that this might be a resignation for any other reason other than this foreign aid? It could be that this is what she's putting public.
Well, I mean, I think there's every reason for her as the International Aid Minister to want to quit over basically a huge cut to the sort of department or the budget that she manages. And she's raised concerns not just about the impact on international aid programmes, but about Britain's sort of soft power more broadly. She says that sort of pulling out Britain's presence from countries where they rely on international aid is only going to spur on countries like Russia and also countries like China, which have been accused of effectively sort of debt trapping lots of countries by flooding them with investment and infrastructure on deals and loans that then become very difficult to pay back and then make those countries beholden or indebted to China. So there are, I think, a number of risks that she's raising here that don't just reflect her own sort of personal criticisms of the decision, but actually of the broader implications for Britain's security and defence going forward as well, which is, I think, what's going to cut Keir Starmer particularly harshly, considering the reason for this move is that it's supposed to have bolstered defence spending and secured Britain's place in the world. She's arguing actually it will have the opposite effect.
And as you say, Aubrey, she actually spells out in black and white in her resignation letter that she was only told about this massive cut to her department 4 days ago on Tuesday. So the minister concerned was only told about this, only informed about this incredibly huge change of government policy affecting her directly on Tuesday, just, not long before it was announced to Parliament. I mean, that is an extraordinary move, but also quite pertinently and perhaps in a politically damaging sentence, Anneliese Dodds writes in this letter that the reality is this decision is already being portrayed as following in President Trump's slipstream of cuts to US aid. There is one of the most senior members of the Labour Party, former minister, former attending cabinet, calling the Prime Minister a Trumpist.
Absolutely. And I think it's a reminder, really, of the difficulty of holding together the breadth of political opinion in the Labour Party. I've been speaking to lots of Labour MPs this week in reform-facing seats who say this is a wonderful move. They think it really sort of speaks to the voters in their seats, and they think that it's a great way of sort of fending off the attacks and the criticism of reform by saying that Labour is really serious about defence spending. And guess what? It will go so far as even to cut international development spending as well. But there you have people like Anneliese Dodds, who represents a very different seat. I think she's the MP for Oxford East, with voters who, you know, she will not feel will be terribly pleased, presumably, by Keir Starmer cuddling up and cozying up to Donald Trump. And so I think that particular sentence that you read out there, Tom, actually really illustrates the difficulty of navigating this tightrope. Keir Starmer knows that he has to sort of bite his tongue and indulge Donald Trump in a lot of stroking of his ego, but there are consequences to that, and Labour MPs are increasingly restive about that sort of strategy and approach.
Really, really interesting, given that, of course, the Labour Party lost a few seats at the general election over the issue of Gaza, to Gaza independence. But in the last few weeks, we've seen the Liberal Democrats really pushing their opposition to President Trump. Perhaps they see this as a fork, as a wedge issue to sort of perhaps go after some of those Oxford seats too, like Anneliese Dodds' seat. I wonder if the Lib Dems will make hay out of this as the Labour Party pivots more and more towards the red wall. But Aubrey Allegretti of The Times, thanks indeed for joining us and discussing this breaking news.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the Liberal Democrats could present a massive thorn in the side of Labour coming up to the next election, potentially. But also, what does this mean for David Lammy? If Anneliese Dodds is so principled as to resign over this issue, why hasn't David Lammy done the same, or at least made it clear what he believes?
Big questions. We're going to be discussing that and so much more throughout the show. Of course, that breaking news that Anneliese Dodds, the International Development Minister, has resigned.